Hello, welcome back to my world of stuff. Let's talk Doctor Who. I did a video a couple of weeks ago, which was an unboxing video of Doctor Who Season 9, the new Blu-Ray box set. And what I didn't do, I haven't talked specifically about what it's like. I unboxed it and I went through it and I told you what was in it. And then I said goodbye. And then I said, keep taking the stuff. What I need to do, I think, and what I've done in the past, is actually talk about the episodes once I've seen them and talk about particularly the special features. So let's have a review of Season 9 of Doctor Who on Blu-ray. Now, I haven't watched all the episodes. The thing about being a Doctor Who fan, I've been a Doctor Who fan since the 1960s, so I've seen these episodes time and time again. I saw them when they were broadcast. I've seen repeats. I've seen them on UK Gold. I've seen them on VHS and DVD. So I'm very familiar with all these episodes. So I haven't sat down and watched all 26 episodes. I have looked at bits of all of them, so I know what the quality is like. But I want to focus particularly on the new special features and obviously talk about the quality of the episodes themselves. And I'll do that first. As I say, I haven't sat and watched these episodes, but I have looked at parts of each story just to see what they're like in terms of the visual presentation of them. You've got to remember that these aren't episodes. These were made 50 years ago. They were made in high definition. They were made largely on videotape. And the restoration team, or the BBC team who work on these episodes, have done a fantastic job on making them look better than they've looked since they were broadcast. But they're never going to be that pinpoint HD sharpness because they weren't made that way. There are film sequences in certain episodes which have been restored, and they obviously, because they're on film, you can HD them. So there are places where you really get superb quality. But from what I've seen the first part of Dare the Daleks, which is one of probably my favourite story in the season. It's one which gets a lot of criticism, but I think it's a really good story, a clever story, beyond any production difficulties with the fact they only had 3 Dalek props and so on. But that, from episode 1 that I've seen, it looks really good. It's really very sharp. The videotape image is very, very clear. Curse of Peladon was always a problematic one because I think that was one that the BBC didn't have a colour copy of, and they got a washed out copy back from an overseas broadcaster, and that's been converted back into a British broadcast standard. And apologies me not being technical on this, but it's never looked very sharp. It's always looked a bit what it is, a sort of a second generation videotape copy that's been perked up a little bit. Now it looks great. It still hasn't quite got the sharpness of, say, Day of the Daleks, but it's certainly the best I've ever seen. I've seen several different attempts to restore this on VHS and on DVD, and every time it's looked a little bit better. Now it has a much more sharper image, but still not the absolute sharpness which you would get from the original broadcast master tape. But that's just a minor sort of quibble, really. Sea Devils is another one, another favourite story of mine across the whole history of Doctor Who. And again, this looks great. Again, the picture is a little bit soft in places. I know there were some issues with the early episodes, but this looks great. I mean, there's a lot of great location sequences. I don't know if they got the location sequences in HD. I'm not entirely sure. But again, it's just a great story. It looks really good. Then we have The Mutants, which isn't a great story. I think that had a similar problem with a slightly blurriness of the picture, of the colours and so on. Again, it's been sharpened up. Again, it looks really good. Again, it looks better than sorry, I'm looking at the door. I'm expecting the cat to come crashing through. Again, it looks sharper than it's looked since it was broadcast. Similarly, The Time Monster, which is the runt of the litter in these stories. Mutants and Time Monster are great stories. They're both outstayed their welcome, but The Time Monster is probably the weakest in terms of the story. Although there's some good performances and some nice location filming. But again, it looks very good. It looks very sharp. Some of the episodes do have a strange sort of line corner of the screen. I've seen some stuff online and various forums talking about that, and I'm not sure what that is. It's not very distracting, really. It doesn't really matter. But certainly, in terms of image quality, and I appreciate this isn't an incredibly technical review, they look great. That's really all I can say. Moving on to the special features then, and as I said, I particularly want to talk about the new special features. Lots of the stuff that's been on previous DVD releases have ported over onto these sets. You're not missing out on anything if you, say, chose to get rid of your DVDs. But this new stuff is what always attracts me to these sets. the first point to make, and I think I made it in the last video, is we don't have a Matthew Sweet interview on this set, which I think is a shame, because his interviews where he sits down in a studio with a Doctor Who cast member, whether it's Tom Baker, Katie Manning, Peter Davison, Sylvester McCoy, Colin Baker, he sits and talks to them for an hour and a quarter. William Russell, I think, in the season 2 box set, talks to them about their careers and, of course, their time in Doctor Who. And they're nice pieces because they're intimate sort of conversations with no agenda other than just talking about their work generally and, of course, their time on Doctor Who. There isn't one on this set, which I think is a shame. It would have been nice to have had one because they always seem to be the centrepiece that everything else revolves around. And the fact that we've been spoilt by having so many, we don't have one this time, it's a shame. But of course the reality is that there's not a lot of people left on this era you can sit down and talk to. And it's interesting to think that Katie Manning, all 3 of her seasons have now been released. She's all over the rest of the special features here, by the way. And we won't see her again, really, because she wasn't around before this and after this. So if you're like Katie Manning, this is your last chance to see her in her prime. She might think she is now, in full flow, talking about her time in Doctor Who, which she clearly loves. Perhaps an interview with John Levine would have been quite nice. We haven't had one. Have we had one for John Levine? I'm not sure. But yeah, he's quite a character. But I don't know. But the absence of a Matthew Sweet interview is notable here. So I'll go through the discs one by one to talk about what's on there. For Day of the Daleks, I don't think there's anything new there. We've got all the stuff that was on the original DVD release, the broadcast version, the audio commentary, the info text, making of documentary. There's the Behind the Sofa, and I'll talk about the Behind the Sofas perhaps more generally. This is the little feature that they have on all these Blu-ray box sets, where they have 3 different sets of Doctor Who alumni, cast members or behind the scenes people, watching these episodes, very often for the first time, because what we tend to forget as Doctor Who fans, we sort of look up to these actors because they played roles of Doctor Who. But they were actors, they were jobbing actors, and they might not have seen Doctor Who before. They might not have seen it since. Certainly that comes across with Peter Davison, for example, who's here with Janet Fielding and Sarah Sutton. In fact, Sophie Aldred and Wendy Padbury, although they have their moment in Doctor Who, that's their moment that they know about, they've never seen these episodes before. They're not familiar with them. And that's quite interesting. We sort of think that people who work on Doctor Who must be Doctor Who fans and know its history intimately. But they don't. They're actors. Then they go into work on these shows for a month and then they walk away. So it's quite interesting to have that perspective on people watching these things who aren't absolutely 100% devoted to the series and look back on it either as a job that they did or a show that they were involved with, and these episodes made long before the time. You get that particularly with Peter Davison and Sarah Sutton and Janet Fielding. Now, Peter Davison, he always looks like he wants to be somewhere else when he's doing these things. He always sits there with his arms across his chest, being very critical about everything. Not much in the history of Doctor Who impresses him, and I think that he wasn't that impressed with his time on the show either. But he is now one of its elder statesmen, so we have to sort of accept that he's involved. And I just think he looks back at the older episodes with a modern critical eye. I mean, certainly he looks at Curse of Peladon and he finds, for example, Alpha Centauri as a costume unacceptable, and lots of things about it. He's very critical of certain directorial decisions and scripting and acting and so on, because he's looking at it as an actor still working now, looking back at performances from the 60s and 70s and not being particularly favourable about them. But it does come across as a little bit wearing when he's constantly looking miserable. And there's always this battle between him and Janet Fielding, who played Tegan, to sort of upstage each other and make each other laugh. And then Sarah Sutton, who is Nyssa, sort of sitting at the end, watching them go at it. The behind the scenes, these behind the sofa things are once only watches, really. You've also got, as I said, you've got Wendy Padbury, who played Zoe in the 60s, and Sophie Aldred, who played Ace, watching them now. And you've got Michael E. Bryant, the director of Sea Devils, on this set, with Katie Manning reviewing the episodes. Incidentally, I've just actually today started reading Michael E. Bryant's book, Who is Michael E. Bryant, which is his, it's published by, I think it's Classic TV Press, came out a few years ago, and I picked up a copy and I've just started reading it. it's his very readable memoir of his time working in the TV industry. You don't find out a great deal about him as a man, but you'd find out a lot about his work. Anyway, that's by the by. So he's on the Behind the Sofa feature with Katie Manning, and they're very nice because they have very different view. Doctor Who's extremely important to Katie Manning because of her friendships with the unit group and John Pertwee, and Michael E. Bryant clearly has very fond memories of his time working on the show. So they have a little bit more affection for the show than perhaps Peter Davison and co. And you get these across every story in the season, as you probably know. Then we get the disc 2, which is the omnibus version of Day of the Daleks. I haven't watched this yet. This is a feature-length 60-minute episode that was broadcast in September 1973. What the BBC often used to do in the 70s is fill the schedule when Doctor Who was off air with omnibus editions, either a 60-minute compilation of a 4-part story or a 90-minute compilation of a 6-part story. This was shown in September 1973. Apparently it's now missing from the archives, but it's been reconstructed. So I'll be interested to see how that looks. It's not exactly as it was broadcast, but it should bring back memories, because I always remember watching those episodes, because back then that was the only way you could see old Doctor Who. This is way before VHS. These shows were screened, you saw them, and you remembered them. And then you got the chance occasionally to see them again in these new... And that was just so exciting as a young Doctor Who fan. Then we got the special edition, which is the behind the scenes of the special edition, which basically is the updated version that was done a few years back with new effects, a couple of new scenes, and new Dalek voices and so on. It actually doesn't say that that's on here. The episode itself, I assume it is. The special edition is the behind the scenes, but it doesn't say that the special edition itself is there. I'm sure it must be there. On the Curse of Peladon, moving across, there's again the Behind the Sofa feature. The Sea Devils is where we start to get some of the new material. We have on disc 2 of the Sea Devils, disc 5 as this actually is, we get several new features here. We get the omnibus edition of the Sea Devils. Again, that's been reconstructed. And it's got Dolby Atmos and 5.1 surround sound for those of you tech heads. But the new stuff, it starts on disc 5. We have a documentary called Location, Location, Location. Katie Manning meets old friends and revisits locations used during the production of season 9. This is a really nice piece. Starts off with her meeting Anna Barry, who played one of the rebels in Day of the Daleks, looking a little frail, it has to be said, but we're talking 50 odd years later, and they go to revisit the Bull's Bridge just outside London, which was the location used for the time portal that the Daleks and the rebels were using to travel back to the 1970s. Massively overgrown now, it's not accessible the way it was then, and they look at it from the towpath. But I've always been I love location stuff. I love seeing places where things were filmed and seeing how they've changed, some cases not changed. And then there's quite an amusing bit where Katie Manning goes to meet the guy who owns the little bubble bike thing that is used in one of the episodes by the Doctor and Joe, this big thick wheel thing, and it's exactly the same machine that was used back in 1972. Amazing. It's still there, it's still in working order. Katie Manning has it going and nearly falls off. That's quite amusing. And then she goes on to the locations of the mutants, which are the Chislehurst Caves and another little cave system near London, with Garrick Hagon, who played Kai in the episodes. And they go deep into the caves, and interesting, in the Chislehurst Caves there's still evidence of the Doctor Who filming there. On the wall, the little markings that were done for the hieroglyphs in the caves, and up in the little tunnel where wooden sort of prop is still there. After all these years, Doctor Who is still in Chislehurst Caves. That's really fascinating. And then we get the Sea Devils, where she meets up with Michael E. Bryant and visits some of the locations of the Sea Devils, including the building that was used as the Master's Prison, and some of the wharfside locations where early scenes were filmed, and the beach where the Sea Devils rose out of the sea. It's a nice feature. I mean, it's just warm. I love those sort of things. I love looking at places and thinking, 50 years ago the BBC were there and all this was going on, particularly when those locations haven't changed. It's just a really nice little piece. Really which is really, it's nice to see the enthusiasm that they both show for these episodes. Then we get a really interesting piece, one of the best pieces on the box set, in fact, Stuart Fell documentary. It's called The Fell Guy. Stuart Fell was a name who cropped up in all the Doctor Who cast lists at this time. He did the stunts, lots of stunts. If somebody's being shot or driven over or falling off a roof or flying through the air, Stuart Fell was in that group. And he's a name I've known for years. I've not really known much about him. I think this is about 30 minutes, this documentary. And it's him chatting about his life and his career and some of his stunts and how he did his stunts and some things he's done and a couple of the colleagues that he's lost along the way. Because being a stuntman is obviously a dangerous occupation. But it's really nice because he's one of those unsung heroes of Doctor Who. And it's nice to hear him talk about his work and his life and his career. Not a famous man, but he worked with a lot of very famous people and became friends with a lot of very famous people. So that's a really, really interesting piece that I would recommend that you watch. Then we move across to the rest of the episodes. I think the mutants, there's nothing new on the mutants. And then we get to the Time Monster. Particularly then onto the, in fact, Disc 8, the final disc on the set, is where we find the main new stuff. One little piece to mention is a piece called John Pertwee's Sketch. This is taken from a series called On the Waterfront, broadcast in 1989. It's a little comedy skit that's never appeared on physical media before, where the Third Doctor finally encounters the Cyberman. He's being interviewed by sort of a psychiatrist who is played by, I'm not sure who plays him, but it's sort of a contemporary sort of TV presenter comedian at the time, talking to the Doctor, and then a Cyberman appears at the end. Quite a nice little thing. Always nice to see John Pertwee. And he's looking in fine form in this particular little 3-4 minute sketch. The new stuff that we have here is on Disc 8 is the Making of documentary. This is a 50-minute feature looking at the making of the Time Monster. Now, bearing in mind, as I said, this is the run to the lit. You might think, why spend 50 minutes talking about this episode? Well, why not? All the other stories have got their making of documentaries, and this deserves one too. So we get Toby Hadoke. He goes back to the location where the story was filmed. Katie Manning's there, John Levine, who is as larger than life, should we say, as ever, talking about their filming around the area. John Levine brings out his usual anecdotes about his imposter syndrome because he wasn't a proper actor, and his love for people like Barry Letts. And he's a very emotional man, John Levine, because he mentions Barry Letts and he sort of bursts into tears for a moment because he's a man in his late 70s now who's had this career, and most of the people he worked with have now gone, and they meant so much to him. And John Levine gets a lot of criticism as being a bit sort of larger than life and awkward, but he seems like a genuinely nice bloke who appreciates what he achieved as an untrained actor. And I like John Levine. I think he's an interesting guy. We also get what else do we get? Oh yes, we also get across all these episodes, these discs, and I haven't explored it all yet. We get Panopticon Archives. Here we've got Ingrid Pitt being interviewed by Nicholas Briggs and Terence Dix. We've got a 50th anniversary archive interview with Richard Franklin, which I did look at, which is quite interesting. Richard Franklin apparently was very ill, pretty much housebound, which is a shame because he would be somebody would be nice to see on an interview, but apparently his health is not good. And you get across other discs, you get archive footage and convention footage and so on. So, yeah, that's the booklets that I think I showed you last time. So I just wanted to do this quick review of what the discs are actually like, because it's easy just to unbox it and say, whoopee, look what I've got. But I think it's nice for people who perhaps haven't taken the plunge yet, because these are, a couple of years' time, this is going to be released on a slimmed down version, slightly cheaper version. So there are maybe some people who'll be waiting for that and might want to know what it's like. Again, it's another sterling set of new features, and that, to be honest, is what I buy these sets for. I've seen the episodes and the DVD. There's nothing particularly wrong with the DVDs, but I'm conscious that the picture quality is better here. I love the presentation of the sets. They're so well put together, and I'm always up for a documentary about classic Doctor Who, and they're always good stuff on these sets. So even the episodes I don't like, the Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy episodes, they're worth getting because the special new material is always worth your time. And that's very much the case. So as I say, you do miss the Matthew Sweet because he's such a presence on these things, and he brings such knowledge and affability when he's talking to his subjects, and you miss that focal point. But it's a very minor criticism, not sure we'll get them back at some point. So that's season 9. I hope this little review, meandering it as it has been of some use to you. If you're on the fence about buying this, or as I said, you're waiting for the cheaper version, or you just haven't got around to getting it yet, because I think these sets now, they don't sell out in days like they used to, because it used to be these would come out on a Monday, and by Wednesday they're on eBay at twice the price. That doesn't seem to happen now. They seem to be available longer, so I think people are taking their foot off the pedal and not going for a mad panic on these things. But yeah, if you haven't picked it up yet, it gets a thumbs up from me. It's definitely worth getting. It's Doctor Who Season 9 on Blu-ray. Hope this has been of interest. As I said, hope it's not been too rambly and incoherent. That should be my middle names, really. If you have liked this, then you need to press that subscribe button, please. It will be smashing. It's there. Just press it. And you'll see all my new videos when they come up. There'll be lots more stuff coming up very, very soon. Coming up in the next week or so, I'm going to be visiting on Thursday. It's currently Tuesday. On Thursday, I'm going out in the evening to see some friends from work. But on the way, I'm going to pop into the Cardiff National Museum, where there is the BBC 100 exhibition. It's closing next week, so I wanted to go down and see it. Thursday is an opportunity, so I'll do a little, do some clips from that and edit them together into a little film. There are obviously bits and pieces from Doctor Who and the whole history of the BBC. That will be coming up in the next few days. And as usual, all the new bits and pieces. A new film coming out, The Pope's Exorcist, in time for Easter weekend. I'm probably going to see that, so there may well be a review of that one coming up soon. Plus anything else that seems appropriate that I want to post on this channel. So all you have to do is press subscribe, press like, thumbs up, leave a comment down below. Please do that, and tell your friends about this channel if you want to. Thanks for watching. I'm away now. I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff. Ooh.